Welcome back to another episode of the Aquademia podcast. I'm your host, Justin Grant.
And I'm Maddie Cassidy.
And today we are sitting down with two guests. Megan Sorby, who is the CEO and co-founder of Pine Island Redfish, and Tom Sorby, who is the COO and also the co-founder of Pine Island Redfish.
Yeah, we have a really fun, exciting conversation with them all about their regenerative efforts in their business. And before we get into that, be sure to subscribe to Aquademia on whichever podcast platform you're listening to us on.
And remember, Aquademia is on X. You can follow us at Aquademia Pod. If you want to contact the podcast for any reason, you can fill out our online form located at globalseafood.org/podcast. And with that, I hope you enjoy this episode, and we will talk to you at the end.
Welcome to the Aquademia podcast.
Our diet is hurting the environment in myriad ways. I mean, we desperately need to eat more seafood.
This is a pioneering industry with a whole lot of people who have really good ideas and a lot of experience and are unafraid.
Aquademia is your go-to podcast for a fresh take on all things seafood.
Megan, Tom, thank you both for joining Maddie and I on the Aquademia podcast. How are you both today?
Doing great.
Yeah.
Very
well.
We're so happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we are very much enjoying the warm weather of Florida, but that tends to be a daily occurrence.
Yeah, I can see the window.
Rubbing it in our face.
Yeah. I can see the sun shining, the brightness in the background, and Maddie and I just got through a very rainy / snowy weekend, and I know in Florida, baseball season, softball season has been well on the way. My softball field that I'm coaching my daughter on is completely underwater, so I don't know when we will get out there to start the season, but I really hope it's soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fingers crossed it'll dry up soon enough.
We need more days like today. I think we're in the high 50s, which in New England, that's shorts and sandals weather.
Oh, yeah. It's summer today.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, that's snow jackets for us. So
Yep. So, Megan, I'm going to start with you. I want to just have both of you give a quick background about yourselves before we kind of jump into our interview questions. But I'll hand the mic over to you, Megan, and have you start.
yeah, so presently I'm the co-founder and CEO of Pine Island Redfish. But prior to that, I've worked for several companies, specifically in aquaculture and aquaculture of marine species or non-commodity species, because I'm probably just a glutton for punishment, and for being in a continuous R&D mode in terms of figuring out the best ways to culture these new species and bring them to the forefront of the seafood sector as good candidates for aquaculture. But I've worked the past 20 years in the industry, and graduated from the University of Miami, and then did my master's at Stirling, at the University of Stirling in Scotland, where I met this guy, Tom.
Yeah, it all went downhill after that.
That's where you give us the sign like, oh, don't keep that in the episode.
Definitely keep that bit in there. 100% keep it in there.
Well, Megan, that was a good segue. Tom, do you mind giving us a little background about yourself as well?
I'm Tom Sorby, also a co-founder, and I'm COO of Pine Island Redfish. I have a very similar background to Megan, as we have worked together everywhere since we met at university in Stirling. So since then, we bounced around between Canada and various states across the US. We've worked and lived in Massachusetts, in Maine, Washington, now Florida. We're in British Columbia for a while in Canada. So we've been around all over really, and been in the industry for a long time. And it's something we're both very passionate about.
Great. Well, we're so excited to have you both on the podcast because you are both the co-founders of Pine Island Redfish, which is a new company that's doing some really, really cool things. So we're excited to get into all of that with you today. But let's take a minute and rewind and give our listeners a little bit of information on how Pine Island Redfish got started. Like, what was your motivation for starting this company?
I think that's multifaceted. And if you look at the sector as a whole, the U.S. in particular needs more aquaculture. And we've seen so many projects proposed in recent years that Tom and I really started thinking about regional relevance, about the right species in the right place with the right type of technology application. And that's where we started circling around basically, what do we know in the US? What have we spent time working on? What is unique about US seafood? What products are unique? And ultimately, how do we do our brand of farming in a way that not only highlights the beauty of those native seafood products to the US, but also in a way that tackles some of the issues that we've seen around the sector. In every place that we have been, there are very specific concerns or questions about aquaculture and farming practices. And the biggest one or I should say the most common one that we encounter really has to do with waste. I feel like in most public meetings or around people, what do people say? And it's, well, what happens to the fish poop? And that, I mean, it's this most basic question, and it's really peculiar and something that has been hyper focused on in aquaculture, much more so than people ask, well, what happens to manure from cattle, pigs, chickens? I don't feel like we've had that same focus point. And so all of that kind of came together in we've always wanted a farm that we have built from the ground up. So that because I feel like, and you can probably comment on this, but probably 90% of what we have done in our careers is come in and go, well, why did somebody do that like that? And I'm sure 20 years from now, somebody will come in behind us and whatever we built and go, why did those idiots do it like that?
Yeah, that is guaranteed to happen. I think a lot of people in aquaculture have definitely, listening to this, have definitely walked into somewhere and just had a puzzled look on their face. But the thing is, if you talk to the person that installed it, it probably made total sense and worked perfectly fine at that point. And then, 5-10 years later, when things aren't quite running as smoothly, that's when it looks a bit odd.
But yeah, it's kind of a summary of all of those things coming together and saying, well, what is the opportunity for something to address each of those concerns? And that's really where it landed. And there, like most startups, like most businesses are built, there was a lot of behind the scenes and nights and weekends and things that happened before the company actually legally formed and came together, but all that legwork in the background really allowed us to get things started fast once we said, hey, we're really going to do this and jump in with both feet.
So jumping in feet first, Florida, you talked about all these different locations that you've been. Right now, Florida is the place. Pine Island. Can you talk a little bit about why Florida was the right place? And this is going to kind of jump us into Redfish as well.
Yeah. This is quite interesting, really, because as a lot of people know in Florida, the bulk of the coast is extremely built up with condominiums. So there's actually very few places that are right on the coast that are even remotely zoned for agriculture. It's a very rare thing to find. As it happens, I was just kind of scrolling on Google Earth, as you do, up and down the coast, trying to find somewhere that might be suitable for a site, because I knew Florida is the right location, but the location is one thing, it's finding the actual area for the site. And that's how I stumbled across Pine Island, and then quickly realized, this isn't particularly developed. There's already a lot of existing agriculture on the island, which is a very good sign early on. But that's really, in a nutshell, how we narrowed it down to Pine Island, was the fact that we knew we needed salt water, so that the best place for access to salt water is to be as close to the coast as possible. That's not to say you can't find it elsewhere further inland, but to be right on top of the source is critical, really. And so that's how we came onto Pine Island and have the site that we do now.
And I think, touching on a couple of your points there's a couple of features about Florida specifically that make it a great location for aquaculture in general, which is to say that we are seen as farmers. Not every state allows for aquaculture to be handled by the Division of Agriculture. A lot of times it can be split between multiple agencies because they haven't quite figured out offshore versus intercoastal versus land-based. Whereas as the state of Florida has said, okay, everything's going through the Division of Aquaculture. We have our own office, our own division that looks at us, assesses projects, handles permitting, and they lean on and liaise with the other departments as needed. But really, that's the one-stop shop for us as operators. So that's a great first place to be. It's very clear cut. But also, coming back to what Tom was saying, is that you're looking for communities too that understand the importance of economic development that fits within the model of their community. So Pine Island itself, like Tom said, is very agricultural, but they also have a very strong fishing background. And I think that is what has allowed us to make friends and build relationships in the community, is to say, hey, we're here. We're not competing with local fishermen. We're bringing something to the market that isn't available now. And, we're also trying to do some other initiatives that will help the island. I think people don't always realize that having a land-based aquaculture building in a coastal community like that, well, it also doubles as a fantastic muster station in a hurricane or emergency situation, because we have all the things. We have backup generators. We have oxygen. It's not medical grade, but, in a worst case scenario, I don't think, you'd be choosy. And we have food and water. So it's one of those things where it's finding a place where people realize that this can be an asset in terms of the future and the resilience of the community and diversity of business in their community too. So,
yeah, that's a great. It's nice to hear that you were so considerate with selecting Pine Island like that, because it is really challenging sometimes to find welcoming communities for any type of new business, especially one that could have an impact on the local community. So with that in mind, why did you pick Redfish to farm?
We're kind of partial. I think it's the best, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the best fish to eat.
So the history of redfish is that, and maybe most people aren't aware of it, but we did a great job of, this has always been a great sport fish, and it was commercially harvested up through the mid 80s. And we did what we do best, which is one amazing chef, Chef Paul Prudhomme, was the first to ever blacken a fish, and that fish happened to be a redfish. And the market went crazy and said, yes, let's have all of it everywhere. And there are even old news articles that the headline was actually the species that Paul Prudhomme killed, which is awful. But we more than quadrupled the harvest of this fish out of coastal waters within a few short years. And Fish and Wildlife in multiple Gulf coastal and Atlantic coastal states rightfully said, time out, we need data, we're going to close the commercial fishery. But they didn't stop there. That was the great part about it. So much funding was put into state fish and wildlife agencies to research and culture redfish for restocking purposes. So it gave us this fantastic groundwork where typically marine species have bottlenecks in terms of scaling to commercialization, which is largely around that early larval rearing and early life stage process. And all of that state funding and some federal funding went into understanding that piece. So automatically that's a leg up to be able to do that. So when we closed the commercial fishery, it also became a very lucrative sport fishery as well. So of the $9 billion a year that is spent in sport fishing in the US, 2 billion of it. So nearly, was that 20%, almost 25%?
I'm not gonna
is specifically targeting redfish. So the passion for the fish is there. The demand for the fish is there. So what do we do with that when the demand is there and we can do something with it? And there have been fantastic farming operations outdoors in ponds in Texas for a really long time. And we're looking to apply a new technology to it to see if we can be more efficient and bring a different type of redfish to the market, one that's a really high quality and a really controlled process that is traceable from start to finish. So
I'm glad you're able to walk us through that brief history. That was something that I learned while I was on your website. And for all of our listeners, we will have a link, and I'll probably say this again at the end of our episode, but we'll have a link in our show notes. But on your website is a really well put together, thought out video that walks through kind of that history. There's some really good shots. You're both famous. You're in it. So
yeah, sometimes you just get forced to do these things.
See, I am the videographer here at GSA. So the best part of that is I never actually have to be on film.
Yeah,
I
lucky you.
I just get to coach everyone and be like, all right, this is what you got to do differently, when deep down I'm saying I could never actually
See,
do
that's
this.
what
I need them to do this.
I need to learn to be a videographer, and then
Right.
Yes, that's
we don't have to hire anybody
that's
anymore
it.
because I can figure it out. You just on there, I'll press record, I'm good to go.
Yeah, I'll get you in touch with like the right camera equipment that you need, a few little short videos, give you the right mic, and then you'll never have to be on video ever again.
I'm ready for that.
don't encourage him. He's so likable, Justin. Don't encourage him. His face is going to be on our packaging. He doesn't know that yet.
Oh.
100%.
You heard it here first,
Definitely
folks.
not. Not if we want to actually sell anything.
Yeah, you could actually look at the analytics and say, ever since this is what our label was, we've noticed.
Yes, it was a steep decline. There you go.
All right, so let's continue talking about, I think you mentioned reverse? Am I saying this? RAS. Recirculating aquaculture system.
You got it.
And it shouldn't take me that long to get that because I visited plenty of them before and I know how they operate. But it's a Monday for those of you.
You helped make a course on them.
Yeah, and I also helped to make a course on it. So I have zero excuses other than it's Monday, and I don't think that counts. So talking about RAS, we'll just do the acronym because that makes it so much easier. Let's talk about waste. Painting a picture of what waste looks like in a typical operation. How is your approach different than, say, someone else's?
So waste on a fish farm in general, let's just start there, right? Fish lay waste like any other animal that you're farming. The interesting part about aquaculture is that it is fluidized. Is the best way to put it. So how do you get it out of there? And then more importantly, how do you make something useful out of it? So a lot of what you've seen in freshwater aquaculture is that much like other forms of terrestrial animal ag, you can repurpose that waste once it's dried or semi-dried into a fertilizer. That's where the whole premise of aquaponics comes from. All of that is feasible. The added issue for us is that we're growing a marine fish. So that waste is salty. So land application doesn't really make sense. And in today's climate, I think there's so much research and so much interest in the process of fish farming being more circular, more regenerative, that there are so many people looking into what to do with the waste. But that salt component continues to be a brick wall. So what can we do with it? You can cut the waste down and find applications for fertilizer or land application. Incineration, which is very energy intensive and costly. And then ultimately a last resort is sending it to landfill, which to us just seems crazy because there is still usable material there. So what can we do with it? What is necessary to do with it? And that's really where we started looking at our operations and how can you contain that waste, how can you separate it, and then ultimately what's it made up of and what's its kind of highest and best use. In addition to that, I think some of the other components of waste that already have high value and that Redfish mimics as well comes to trimmings, to fish that are graded out that can be used for other purposes, other feed products. Those all still exist with our farming operation. And so when we talk about waste, and we refer to Pine Island Redfish as a regenerative aquaculture process, and that's where we've kind of had to jump up and down and say, hey, when we talk about regenerative, we shouldn't just be talking about the potential for seaweed farming or shellfish farming to be regenerative. We need to be talking and focusing on how finfish farming can also have regenerative aspects. And we have a tremendous advantage right now, especially in the US, where, yes, for a very long time, we have been behind the curve in terms of developing more aquaculture projects. We have the opportunity to implement that as a critical piece to the operation from the beginning, instead of what you're seeing in conventional ag right now, where they're subsidizing farmers and trying to convince farmers to switch to more regenerative and rewilding practices on their land. We have the ability to form that way from the beginning. So how do we do that? And that's really been a focus point for us.
I really like your focus on the word regenerative. I think that has become such a buzzword in the past few years. And one aspect of Pine Island Redfish that is like the epitome of regenerative is your initiatives and work with restoring mangroves. And so for our listeners who might not be familiar with mangrove forests, can you give a brief description on why they're important to the ecosystems that they're found in?
So mangroves are obviously a keystone species. They're extremely important, not only as a habitat, for habitat, but also for obviously shoreline stabilization, improving water quality, through the uptake of nutrients, which is hence why we can grow them. And I think without them, you've seen areas, especially in Florida. Florida's a great example of this area, and Pine Island particularly, because Pine Island obviously has recently been hit with hurricanes. The areas of the island where the mangroves have been removed for housing or other development were the worst affected by the storm surge from the hurricanes. The areas where there was a big mangrove buffer on the island were much less affected. For example, our site has a very big mangrove buffer. It stretches across the whole length of the site, and it's very deep. And it does its job. It's what it's designed to do. Nature designed it to do, and it stops that storm surge, which reduces flooding. And obviously, this is becoming more of top of people's mind with coastal flooding, especially in Florida, the more increasing frequency of hurricanes. And so, the mangroves play an important part of maintaining Florida coastline.
Well, and it goes back to the question that you asked about why Florida, why Pine Island, and really the Gulf of Mexico, or the Gulf of America, as it is so named on the maps now, is now it has this kind of multiple issues to tackle, right? We need more habitat restoration in our coastal waterways, and that's anything from seagrasses to mangroves to coral reefs. All of those initiatives are out there. We also combat agricultural runoff and nutrient loading in the Gulf, and with warming temperatures, it's led to more algal blooms. And as Tom just detailed, the hurricanes, those three things can be mitigated with this amazing plant. I don't think people always realize what a powerhouse it is. And on top of those three things that are very core to Floridian concerns and to the Gulf concerns, there's also the carbon aspect, the carbon sequestration aspect of these plants. So they don't just absorb carbon or sequester carbon, but they also store it in the soils underneath them as well. So you have this capability to tackle these threats, but also achieve some of the carbon sequestration goals that we have. I mean, mangroves, and particularly red mangroves, they can sequester 10 times as much carbon as their land-based counterparts. So they are truly a magnificent species. Something that, if you haven't personally seen them, they're quite majestic, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, they're big prop roots and big, beautiful green leaves. I mean, they're beautiful. And underneath, you have thousands of teeming fish and roosting birds on top. So it is a wildlife lover's dream.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to get to go to a shrimp farm in Ecuador that's like nestled in the middle of a mangrove forest, and it was probably the most beautiful place I've ever been. It's the mangroves were just so stunning, and the wildlife is unbelievable. Like everything is just flourishing there. It seemed it was really, really, honestly magical to see.
Well, and for people that are familiar, because they so like Tom and I are both keen fisherwomen. So clearly limited interests, fish farmers and then fishing and free time.
Yeah, I mean, people that know us get pretty fed up because all we seem to talk about is fish.
You love what you love,
like
okay?
Fish or fishing.
But what a really cool thing to be able to be growing a fish that you love to go out and catch, but also on the back end of that process, be able to enhance the habitat of the native fishery that you like going out to fish for. Like I don't know, there's something really cool about that.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that leads us really nicely into what specifically Pine Island Redfish is doing to support these mangrove ecosystems in your area.
Yeah, so we take there are two components of waste, since we didn't really jump into this to begin with. So we have the nutrient waste that's in the water, and then we also have solid waste. And this is the cool thing about RAS, which is to say that with the different filtration units in a recirculating aquaculture system, you can partition out those different pieces and make it useful. So when we separate our solid waste, that goes into a settlement area where we can allow that solid waste to dry. That's one component. And that has some really nutrient dense properties about it itself, both in nitrogen and phosphorus. And then there's the liquid portion of those nitrogen and phosphorus components. And that's kind of the two parts of it. So we use the solid waste to, in mixture with conventional compost, to pot our mangrove seedlings. And then we essentially actively fertilize those plants on a regular basis with water that is leaving the RAS system.
And there's a kind of added bonus of the fact that we're a marine RAS facility, because obviously we use salt water. Mangroves you can grow them from seedlings in freshwater or very low salinity. But mangroves that are grown in salt water, especially higher salt levels, are much more robust. They form a much more robust root system, and that means they have a much better chance when you go actually to replant them, that they'll have a higher chance of establishing and flourishing. That's not to say they don't establish when they're grown in freshwater, but they're a much more robust plant when they've been grown in salt water their entire life.
Yeah, that makes sense. How has this created new opportunities to have really that open conversation about aquaculture?
Yeah, that's really been an unexpected thing, don't you think, Tom?
I think it's been a great way to connect with more people. It's because a lot of people I guess there's a lot of people that want to help the environment. I think most people do. However, a lot of people that want to help the environment for some reason think that fish farming is the worst thing ever, or it's terrible. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of preconceived notions about aquaculture, mainly particularly in finfish aquaculture. Unfortunately, I think the people that have been so against aquaculture in any form have been the loudest, and that's usually what people have heard about aquaculture. So most people aren't familiar with what it is.
Right.
The people that are familiar, they generally have only ever heard negative things about the industry. It's very rare for someone to have heard any real positives about any form of aquaculture.
Yeah, especially if they're not in the industry and they're not familiar. Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of preconceived
notions,
ideas that are so negative. And we spend a lot of time like mystifying these thoughts, these what they think are facts that aren't actually accurate. But
no, it's fine. No, I think that's the nice thing. So we get these people engaged, and then we get at the same time we're talking through mangroves and mangrove restoration. We get to tell them about our fish farming process and how that works, and just generally help to paint a better picture of aquaculture overall. Obviously, we'll focus heavily on what we're doing specifically, but we're always more than happy to try and answer any questions about any other fish farming practices that people have questions about.
I think it breaks down the barrier. People, because you're out there doing something that's a collective good, you're out there restoring a particular area or a shoreline against someone's seawall, something like that, that people all of a sudden the guard comes down a little bit and they're more comfortable asking a question that they wouldn't necessarily have asked someone otherwise. And I guess it's just establishing common ground. You're both out there for this purpose. They obviously know where these mangroves have come from, where they've been grown. And they say, well, maybe I can ask my question about what do you actually feed the fish that you're farming, or, what does happen to the waste. And to be able to paint a really positive picture with that, and to be able to say, hey, the fish that are in the water for Pine Island redfish this year have grown over 5,000 trees that are starting to be planted out now. When people put their hands on them, they're like, oh, this was grown by a fish and a person that, can answer my questions. And all of a sudden people really engage with it. When we launched our fish in retail for the first time a couple of months ago, just ahead of SENA, we had so many of the volunteers that come out to do restoration work with us call us and say, hey, I heard that you were going to be in Publix. What locations? Where can I go buy it? And to be able to have people engage with your seafood product because of the regenerative aspect of your business, that I think should be sending alarm bells to big corporate, especially, that this is a direction that your customer base and that will connect with. This is what people want. They want to be part of that story and they want to be involved in it. So many people have actually come up to us after mangrove planting and have said, can I come tour the farm? Where can I learn more about aquaculture? That has been a surprising and really welcome byproduct of this aspect of our company, is that people have engaged in a way that we've never experienced before. And I as usual in the small communities where aquaculture farms generally form, we have found some of the most amazing people on Pine Island and in the surrounding areas. And as part of the partnerships that we've built in the restoration work, so many people that are just amazingly smart, amazingly engaged with their ecosystem and environment, but also in building their community in a way that they want to see it for the future. And that's just, we can't say enough about the support that we get from the community for sure.
And who is it you're going to speak with this week?
Yeah, so actually, really cool. We got outreach from a community member, a resident of Pine Island, a couple of weeks ago, who is interested in starting their own restoration nonprofit, specifically for Pine Island and specifically to keep Pine Island coasts wild. And they want to, but they've never done any of this type of work before. So they want to sit down with all of it's a group of retired guys, some of them still working, I think, part-time. And they want to care for the mangroves that we have down on Pine Island. We're expanding to start up that larger site right now. And they want to learn how we grow them. They want to do the maintenance on this next year's crop and work with us on all the grow out and replanting of the mangroves. So what a cool thing to be able to say, hey, these people are out here, they're forming, they're organizing, and they're organizing to rewild our coastlines. What? That's just awesome.
Wow.
And so what little part that we can play in people getting energized to do that themselves on their own accord, that's we'll take it. We'll take it.
Right.
Oh,
Like they are
absolutely.
going above and beyond. Like they're taking your mission and also running with it and adding their own specialness to it. That's a really, really cool story to hear.
Yeah.
That kind of leads us into one of our last questions, which is, what does the future look like? What's the next 5 to 10 years? And specifically, if more people embrace this regenerative approach. And you just gave a perfect example of that. Could you elaborate more maybe on that question? What else could be on the horizon?
I want you to comment on this one too, because obviously our visions we have similar visions, but also separate ones. Which is, I think, we don't want this to stop with just Pine Island redfish and mangroves. There's more stories with finfish to tell, like this one, which is to say that this nutrient profile and its usefulness in different regenerative applications can be really wide-reaching. We've worked with some phenomenal species over our careers that don't like the warm water like redfish does. They like cold water. But there are still marine species that have a fantastic nutrient profile that something can be done with it. So what can we do? And I hope that we can, as a company, lead some of that charge into different locations, new species, and new regenerative projects. The West Coast of the US has tremendous potential with kelp reforestation. There's so many great species out there that are outside of kind of the big three, the salmon, tilapia, shrimp, and they have phenomenal properties in terms of being able to fit this regenerative profile. So I hope that the next 5 to 10 years for us is making sure that everybody knows how special a redfish is, and it's on every plate, and everybody knows that this is a fish that is only native to the U.S. And why in the world would we do anything but domestically produce it? So I hope that is the message that we put out there, first and foremost. But second of all, to say that, hey, we can farm this fish in a way that actually does more than just nourish our bodies. It can actually nourish our coasts and make sure that we can continue to live on our coasts for the future. But
that was pretty well summed up there, to be honest. I don't know if too much I can add to that, but I think I would like to say, I think overall I'd like to see more awareness and support of aquaculture across the US in any of that farming form. I don't think we should be singling out any particular production method, whether that's RAS, whether that's net pens, whether that's in ponds or raceways or however you want to grow it. I think we need to grow aquaculture overall in the US. There's going to be some areas that are prime for RAS. There'll be some areas of the coastline that will be much more suited for net pen production, areas much more suited for pond production. So I think we need to embrace all forms of aquaculture, particularly finfish aquaculture. We need to do more of it. And I hope that we continue to grow the industry in the US so we can rely less on imports. The rest of the world has already got with it and is producing finfish and shellfish, out the wazoo. And that the US is one of the biggest countries in the world, and we seem to be lagging behind in aquaculture production, which I think is a bit sad, really. I think the US has so much potential, not just for the species that are currently grown, but there's definitely potential for a variety of new species. And I look forward to seeing the industry grow overall.
Yeah, your point on not focusing too much on production method is well taken. That is something that we talk about a lot here. Is it's really easy within the seafood industry when there's so many different species and production methods. There's so many different niches to attach yourself to that it can be easy for people to pit themselves against each other within just our own industry. So I could not agree more with what you're saying, that it's more important that we talk about the benefits of all seafood as a whole, whereas instead of focusing on certain anything.
And the more we build, the more that you have collections or clusters or pockets of aquaculture development, the easier and more viable it all gets, because whether you're a seaweed producer, a shellfish producer, a finfish producer, you're all buying relatively the same gear, the same consumables, feeds, all of those things. So the more hubs we build, the more of those resources install themselves right next door or close by, and all of a sudden the economics of all our businesses improve. And likewise, the end point to the consumer, seafood gets less expensive. It's not looked at as a nice to have. It's looked at for the nutrition value that it has, which it is prime, and it shouldn't be out of reach. So that's really a piece of it too.
Typically, I would ask if there's anything else you want to add, but the way you both answered that last question was so thoughtful and powerful that I don't want to continue the episode anymore. I just want to be like, okay, that was it. That's how we're ending it. End scene. But I will ask this. If any of our listeners want to learn more, want to get involved, what is the best way they can do that?
That's always the best way.
Okay, so we'll put Tom's information on the show notes.
Here's Tom's personal cell phone number.
It's everywhere, right?
FaceTime only.
Cell number I've already had, so it's definitely all over the internet.
No, the quickest link to the company is to reach out via the website. So we have a contact us page, and please reach out. Even if you're just visiting Florida for a vacation or whatever, we welcome the opportunity for people to come out and see us, to share where you can find our fish, but also if there are seedling or mangrove propagule collection events going on, particularly around seedling season. If there are planting events going on, even if it's not close to us, we can link you up to one of our partners. We have partners on the East Coast of Florida as well. So any involvement where people can get hands-on and connect with that story, it's a great opportunity. So please reach out no matter how far you are, and we will find a way to loop you in.
Excellent. And I'll make that really easy for our listeners. They can just check out our show notes page, and all of those useful links, including Tom's cell phone, will be on there.
I'll be ready.
Well, thank you both so much for coming on this episode of Aquademia. We've really enjoyed talking to you, getting to know you throughout this process. So thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you guys so much. We really love what you guys are doing.
Folks, that was our conversation with Megan and Tom. I hope you enjoyed it as much as Maddie and I did. It was a great conversation. We covered a lot of ground. Be sure to check out our show notes for some really valuable information and links. Remember, you can follow Aquademia on X at AquademiaPod, and you can also contact us via our online form located at globalseafood.org/podcast.
And if you want to help the show out, then subscribe to us or follow us on whichever podcast platform you listen to us on, or leave us a rating and review. And we will talk to you next time.
Ciao.
Bye.